Our next keynote will be Mike Fucci. As chairman, Mr. Fucci leads the Deloitte Board of Directors in providing governance and guidance in priority matters such as firm strategy, risk mitigation, and talent development. Mr. Fucci previously served as COO of Deloitte Consulting, National Managing Director of Service and of Partner Matters. Mr. Fucci led the U.S. human capital practices growth to over $1 billion in revenue. In 2008, he was named to Consulting Magazine's distinguished top 25 consultants list for his work with clients and his leadership excellence. In his time as chairman, Mr. Fucci has focused on increasing transparency of board activities and strengthening Deloitte's sense of partnership among active and retired partners. He has prioritized enhancing Deloitte's succession processes and modernizing Deloitte's partnership agreement. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Fucci to the stage.
Good morning, good afternoon. I think it's morning still. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited. When I do these kind of speeches, seminars, discussions, it's kind of what gets me going. When I look around the room and I say people of your age and your experience, just sitting here, and I heard about the case study that you just finished. Honestly, after 35 years of working with Deloitte, this is kind of what gets me very energized. And having this happen right before the week of Thanksgiving, I get thanks from this. So thank you for letting me present to you. That's your gift to me. I thought we'd do a couple things today. I want to tell you a little bit about my journey at Deloitte. And you'll see it's going to be a lot different than some of the journeys that you guys have been on or will be on. I want to talk a little bit about what our firm looks for in terms of hiring and recruiting and kind of what we represent, and how let's call it, the things that are important to millennials and our younger generation are really what's driving us as a business force today. So that, and then I'll do some Q&A after we do that. Let me just talk about my personal journey. So I actually grew up in New Jersey, right across the river. And I was actually the first person in my family to ever go to college. So when I was a senior in high school, I had really good grades. I didn't even have anybody I could talk to about college. I mean, back when I was, I'm ancient. So back when I was in the 70s, when I went to high school, you didn't have great college, in high schools didn't have great college departments of telling you all the things in different schools. So I literally didn't have anybody in my family who I could talk to about college because, no one has gone there before. So when I went to college, that was like my big frontier. I went to a state college in New Jersey, and I studied math. And the reason I studied math was because it was something I was good at. It came easy to me. And I really was I always had this knowledge about, it seemed to me that there was a lot more behind math than you studied. And now 30-something years later, and you guys talk about analytics. I mean, analytics is really the modern day math major. I would have been an analytics major probably if that existed, 30 years ago. So I majored in math, and I literally graduated. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So the biggest difference that you see so far nowadays is, and I see it in my own kids. I have a son who's a senior in high school now, who's already, he knows what he wants to do. And I graduated college with a degree. I got good grades. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I talked to a couple of people. I knew one thing. I didn't want to teach. And a lot of people who had a math degree taught math. So I said, I don't want to teach, but I have no clue what I wanted to do. So I talked to a couple of recruiters, and they said, oh, you have a degree in math. You have good analytical skills. Be an actuary. I said, oh, that's great. What is it? And so literally a recruiter gave me about a 10-minute snippet on what an actuary was. I interviewed at a couple of firms that actually had actuarial departments. And I got a couple of offers. And Touche Ross, which was the legacy Deloitte and Touche firm, was one of them. Now, I had 4 offers. And 3 offers were for firms that were large, had very big actuarial departments. And one was with Touche Ross, where I would be the 3rd person hired in this department. So I look back now and I say, using the logic that I would have today, there's no way on earth I should have taken that job. It was the same salary. Everyone gave me exactly the same salary. So it wasn't like I was going to make a little more money. So I look back in logic and say, I don't know why logically, under any logic I would use, would have taken that role. It was, if you look at, any kind of criteria you'd base a job on, other than the people I met were different. I actually felt like I was going into a firm where there was 3 or 4 people in the department. And as I interviewed with them, they said to me, oh, from day one, you're going to come with me to clients. When I went to the other firms I looked at, they were like, well, we have a formal training program, and you won't even smell a client for 2 years, and you're going to do this. And I'm like, that's not, I don't go. Now, I knew nothing. So my first question after I started there was, okay, I'm going to go to a client with you. What if they ask me a question? I know nothing. I'm here for a month. I'm not even learning anything yet. And they said, don't worry about it. Just follow my lead. The best advice that I can give you is you need to be able to feel comfortably uncomfortable. And so I was there, and my first meeting, talk about how things changed. My first meeting was with a client called Mitsubishi, who I think everybody understands is a huge Japanese company. I went there with a female senior manager. So it was the 2 of us. She was very skilled. She had 15 years experience. I had 15 minutes experience. We walk in to meet with the CFO of Mitsubishi, and we're starting to talk, and they start looking at me and asking me questions because, back then, there weren't a lot of women that were in senior positions. And they're asking me questions, and I'm panicking. I'm saying, okay, how do I, what kind of skills do I need to say, turn the conversation to her? And I did, and it took me a while, but every time they asked a question, I'd make sure that she answered it because she had the content. But it took me about 15 minutes, and then eventually they talked to her because they knew either I knew nothing or I was steering the conversation away to the person who they should talk to. So in that, there's a lot of things in there besides, number one, it taught me a skill around consulting, around sometimes having to deal with kind of a human dynamic and situations that don't always go like you think. Second of all, you look how far things came in just the whole issue around gender, where back then, there weren't that many women that I worked with who were in senior positions or more senior positions than the men. And so you look 30 years from that ahead and how things have progressed. But I think I remember that story a lot because it really taught me a lot about kind of, quote, being able to learn on the fly. So using the skills that you understand, that you learn, that you work hard in school to go through, but how to use them on the fly, which is why the case competition, and I'll tell you, I wish I was going to stay, if I have another engagement after this, I was going to stay and watch the case competitions. But those are what actually make people, in my mind, make you your best at your firm, wherever you choose to work. I did these a lot. I did recruiting for a long time when I was running my human capital practice. And I will tell you, we did 2 sets of recruiting. So day 1, we did the traditional, you meet with 10 people for a half hour, you talk about how you solved world peace and everything, and the resumes are just amazing that you see nowadays. The second morning, you do a case competition, and I would watch somebody interact with a group of 10 people. And I will tell you, I don't remember the stats, but if I made 10 job offers that day, 8 of them were people who did better in the case competition than the interview. Because you know what? It gets to a point where right nowadays, everybody has, and I have 2 older kids. I have 2 kids that are in their later 20s, and I have a 17-year-old. And I could just tell the difference in the last 10 years of things like applying to college. Nowadays, every kid has a 3.8 or 4 GPA. Every kid has 1,600 on SATs. When I went to school, if you got 1,300 SATs, you got into Harvard. I mean, and you did. I mean, 30 years ago, that's what it was like. So you have to look for the differentiating factors now that are so different than what it was years ago. But so early on, again, I learned the skill. I learned the skill around how to use a situation and try to use your ability to be comfortably uncomfortable, and how do you work a team dynamic. So that's the thing that you hate to say it, you can't learn that in school. You have to learn that in the business world. Second thing I learned is probably mentorship was the biggest thing that meant the most to me. Having somebody sit down and tell me the truth about my performance. It's really funny. A lot of firms they want to give you positive criticism, right? They want to sit back and how great you did in a job. And you know when you do a good job. What you need somebody to do is sit down, even if the job you did was well, you did a good job, really good, you need somebody to sit you down and say, you know, well, in this particular stream, you could have done this, you did this, and here's why. And I found that even though, instead of just wanting a success, I wanted feedback around the next time I did it, even though the project was successful, what I could do differently, and maybe even make it better. And I think that, so mentorship has become a big deal. But, and I've done a bunch of articles on this recently, mentorship isn't enough anymore. Now it's about, the term I use is sponsorship. And sponsorship is really where, I define it like this. Mentorship is, you come into my office and I give you, I'm more senior, more older, I give you feedback kind of things that I did in a situation that you may be able to apply to your situation. So it's me talking to you. That's mentorship. So giving you advice, giving you counsel, here's some of the things to steer away from. Sponsorship, though, is where I say, I listen to you. Rather than me telling you anything around what I did, it's more around you tell me what your issue is, and I need to walk in your shoes. I need to understand what's going on with you today, not what I did 20 years ago. What I did 20 years ago is irrelevant. I was saying to somebody outside, just to tell you guys, when I first started at Touche Ross, there was no internet. There was no personal computers. Think about that. There was no personal computers. We had to walk down a hallway. There was one room that had big central computers that you had to share. So no internet, no personal computers. And you talked to clients on the phone. You didn't text them. You didn't email them. You didn't fax them. You talked to them on the phone, and you went and met with them. And I would tell you, that is a skill that I learned early. Is, like I said, that example I gave you about Mitsubishi, you know, nowadays, you don't see many places where you can go meet with a client in 45, 60 days of starting with the firm. And so that whole concept is really important, that sponsorship concept. Somebody looking out for you, but the way I look at it is, I'm putting my reputation on the line for you. So I have people that I sponsor, but it's a few. You can't sponsor hundreds of people. You can mentor a lot of people. I mean, in fact, if I look at my week, probably 10% of my business week, people come into me and just they want advice on stuff. So I call that mentorship. So I'll give them advice, but it's transactional stuff, and you know, they think it helps. Probably I have about 5 to 10 people I actually sponsor. Means I get to know them on a personal level. I really get to understand not only what they're good at, but what they're not good at. And I actually share my personal stuff with them. So we develop a relationship that creates something a little bit higher than mentorship. So to me, sponsorship, and when you look for a firm, you should look for a firm that actually has an aura of sponsorship with it. Training is great. Formal training is great. Mentorship is great. But ultimately, sponsorship is the thing that's different. And it's hard. You have to really be able to differentiate between, you know, when you go on an interview. Even in a case competition, you have to be able to understand the team dynamic. I mean, we look for that a lot. It's how people work together in a team. Because especially if you work in a field like ours, at a company like Deloitte, you know, the famous line we use is, our assets walk out the door every day. I mean, we don't have anything. Our assets are our people. And so how do you actually determine what best asset you have? It's because I would say this, everybody we have is smart enough. You get it? Smart enough. But everybody we have does not have the ability to work in teams and actually make the team better. Because when you work in a team well, the result is better than any individual. So 8 of you individually are not as good as a team dynamic that you get a 9 from versus an 8. That's what I interview for. When I interview people, I interview for people that have that team dynamic. There's times, everybody wants to be a leader, but there's times when you can't be a leader, that you actually have to be a team member and a follower, regardless of what your position is. So that's the kind of stuff that it sounds warm and fuzzy to say that, but that's the differentiator, I think, in a good firm, is the ability to see people, and everybody can't fight to be a leader. Everybody can't fight to get, quote, 100 on their exam. It's not about you getting 100. You know, in a perfect world, everybody gets 100 on every exam. What the situation is going to be is, how do you work together, and maybe you getting a 98 and helping somebody else get a 92, that's probably better for the firm than somebody getting 100 and somebody getting a 60. Think about it. And so that's the kind of stuff you look at and say, that's what makes things special. And that's what I've looked for. And that's what I try to, at this point in my career, that's what I try to stand for too, is really push that angle. Let me tell you about a story, because I know you just did a case competition. Last week I was at the University of Texas. And I did a speech like this to a bunch of seniors. And before we did that, we went to see a place in Austin. I was out in Austin, and Austin, as you know, it's kind of a mini Silicon Valley. They're trying to build it up as a very tech-savvy city. It's actually a very cool city if you've never been there. It's worth going to see. But they have something called the Capital Factory, and it's basically space where entrepreneurs rent together, and they run their ideas by each other. And so it's just walk in, and first thing I notice, you walk in and there's this like giant beanbag that people are laying on a beanbag outside the elevator. And they're serving, I'm sure, they're serving beer at 11 o'clock in the morning. There's beer on tap. But it's a bunch of small, they can't have more than 12 employees. So it's all these small entrepreneurial technology-based firms working together. And all they do get out of it is they're sharing common space and common cost, but they're sharing the ability to work together and work off, and feed off each other. So one of the things I actually did was, while I was there, 3 different CEOs. Now, the CEOs were all 26, 27, and 28. I asked them how old they were. And they presented their company to me. They said, it's in process, here's what we're thinking of. So it's kind of like it was like an innovation engine. It was pretty amazing. All 3 of them blew me away in terms of the idea they had. A couple of them came up to me and said, any advice I had? And I said, listen, you're probably a lot more skilled in this technology than I am. I will tell you one thing though, don't lose sight of the human dynamic piece of it. So, even though they're developing a great piece of software or something, they all did different things. One person was inventing kind of a platform for cyber risk, but it was focused around using veterans, because this guy was a veteran, and so it was working through the veteran network of companies. Another one was using another technology platform to pull together common social media platforms. And all 3 of them had different things. But what I felt is the ideas were all great, but I wanted to make sure that they needed to understand that you have to understand how to market it, how to work as a team, those aspects. And so it's funny, because they all looked at me funny when I said that, because listen, I'm not going to give them advice as to whether that company works. They're way smarter than I am around risk technology. But what I tried to do is give them that, that aspect of it, what can make something good to great. And I think that's something that sometimes we lose sight of. Anybody know who Mark Benioff is? There's a company called Salesforce, okay, Salesforce.com, which it's revolutionizing the technology industry. We had a partner-director meeting 2 weeks ago in Las Vegas. So I hosted a meeting. We had 6,500 of our partners and directors in Las Vegas. And it's funny, it happened to be on my birthday. So I said I had a birthday party for 6,500 of my closest friends in Las Vegas. So we had a bunch of innovative speakers. We had J.B. Straubel, who is the Chief Technology Officer for Tesla. He was one of the co-founders. You hear the name Elon Musk a lot, but J.B. Straubel was the other guy that co-founded it. And he spoke, I opened the meeting, he spoke after us about the concept of innovation. But it was so interesting, because let me ask you, if I could put somebody on the spot. When you think of Tesla, what do you think? They are what? Can somebody raise their hand and just say, Tesla is what? What kind of company would you say it is? Car company. No. They're an energy company. They consider themselves an energy company, and their whole mission is around safe energy. And so now they actually bought there was an article, they just bought a company called Solar Cities. I saw it in the news this week. Their whole issue is to do the whole So yeah, I know them as you do the electric car or the driverless car, but that's only a means of getting them to really, their ministries around energy. They're installing these things in houses which capture solar energy, but actually get you, one of the problems with solar energy is if it's bad out if there's no sun out for 10 days, you could have no power in your house. They've found a way where they captured it, where they have it's almost like a transformer that could hold and store energy for 30, 60 days. And now they're putting these solar roofs on, so you could actually drive your Tesla into the garage, and it will get automatically, they're really an electric energy company. I was amazed, because I think of that. I think of them as, the cars are just a way of expressing or selling the concept of energy. But then we had Mark Benioff speak, the CEO of Salesforce. I'm going to read a quote he said, because I really thought this was really impactful. He said, "The business of business is improving the state of the world." What he meant by that is, you know what? What's changed from when I started to now is the social impact and the social dynamic about businesses. And it's not just, listen, every business has to make money and has to make a lot of money. But if you're doing it without regard to a social impact, that's probably the difference of 30 years ago. People not that they didn't, it wasn't even on the radar screen. It wasn't that they decided to reject it. It wasn't on the radar screen. And now it's on the radar screen of every company, of our company. I mean, we just announced a very healthy paid time off policy for people who need to take off time in case they have, not only having children, but if you have sick parents, if you have sick friends, and you need to take care of people. We found that researchers giving 22 weeks paid for that gets an employee engaged. Now, 20 years ago, we would have said, oh my God, that's going to cost so much money. They're not working. They're going to leave anyway. What we found is the data shows that those employees will leave because they'll find a firm that gives them what they want. And so that's just an example. The next speaker we had, so Mark Benioff had a great, I love that line. It's very simple, but it's very complex. Then we had a guy, I don't know if you ever heard of a company called, anybody here of a company called Charity Water? Well, we had a guy named Scott Harrison. And Scott was a guy who grew up in a city, New York, and he grew up as a nightclub promoter. He was making, at 27 years old, he was making like $5,000 a night by promoting Budweiser and Sky Vodka. He would get in ads, and they would pay him because he'd be sitting at parties and clubs in the city, making a ton of money. And he woke up one morning and he said, what the hell am I doing? He said, yeah, I'm making a lot of money. I'm drunk every night, but it's not going anywhere. So he started a company. He decided, he took a trip to, I forget what country in Africa. He was realizing that people in Africa can't get clean water. They can't get clean water to drink. And he showed a video of people who stood in line for 2 days to fill up a jug because there was one stream coming out of a mountain. And they had to go back and feed their little children with that water. So he started this company called Charity Water. And what they do is on donations, they actually build wells because the water's there. You just can't get to it. And they build wells in Africa. And it was you had to see this presentation just wowed everybody. At one point, it's a true story. So he tells a story about a little girl that passed. I won't tell the whole story, but literally we probably had, if you look down around the auditorium, we had 6,500 partners and directors. 6,400 of them, including myself, were crying. The story was so impactful. So it's funny because I had to thank him. So he tells a story, and then the video goes dead, and I'm like, oh crap, I'm going to go up on stage. I'm crying here. But he had 2 more minutes to finish, so I was able to compose myself. But it's funny. So what he did is, it was a simple event. Because this little girl wanted to raise money for them, and she died before she could raise money, she donated her birthday. So the concept is you donate, instead of having a gift, however you older, just have someone donate $30 to Charity Water rather than give you a birthday gift. So listen to this though. So it happened to me, I told you it was my birthday, right? So I said, okay, I'm donating my birthday. Within 24 hours, we collected $60,000 from other partners donating. We opened up a website, and it happened to be Kathy Engelbert, our CEO's birthday a week later. There was a website called Mike and Kathy's Birthday. Partners were going on, and it actually almost exploded the the website for a while because people were just going on and donating money. So in a couple of weeks now, we have $60,000. And we have some partners sending messages saying, I'm taking a trip to Africa next year. I actually want to drill a well. Now, it has nothing to do with what we do. But you know what it did? It made, if you looked around a room, it made 6,500 people feel like this room, feel like a family. Had nothing to do with Deloitte or its mission or anything. But what it did, it captured people. And I wish, you know, I got to figure out a way. I'm going to write that story to our staff to get it online. Because I think they would love just hearing about that. The fact that a bunch of partners sitting around the room crying because of this, and it was really nothing to do with Deloitte. It was so beautiful to see that it had nothing to do with the firm. So I actually think this whole concept of connecting business and social impact is going to be critical. We're just talking at the table for a second too. The other thing is, I told you I was a math major. Everybody says analytics. How many of you have studied or study analytics? Okay, analytics is amazing. It's, in fact, like I said, it would be my major now if they offered it when I was in college. But people look at analytics a little bit differently. You know, analytics, they say we need to get the data. It's really important about getting the data. I'll tell you, it's actually not. It's about getting the insight from the data. And so there's enough data right now to find anything. The question is, when you get data dumps, I get a lot of data dumps, and I don't know, they give me, I was explaining to somebody, they give me a list of, you know, we have about 70,000 people in Deloitte in the US. I get a list of once a week or once every 2 weeks of people that came on and people who left. A list of names. Do you think I'm going to know 70,000 people? What good is that to me? I mean, if they said to me, if the data said, we hired 70% women, we lost 40% minorities, that's data that I could get insight into and I could do something about. But give me a list of people's names, like I rip it up. It doesn't mean anything to me because it's you know, it's not, the analytics aren't providing data. The analytics are, so what does the data tell you? And so I would tell you, like, hopefully in your case competition, if it was data driven, hopefully each of you kind of were looking more around the insight than the data. We have enough data to go around in the world forever. Every executive has enough data they don't need any more data. They need to be able to get insight from that data to really kind of make it pop. That's really where you get a lot of the vision out of is the insight of data. Let's see. One thing that, kind of one of the, you know, a lesson learned that I had, and I wish I would have had earlier in my career, would have been I always say, choosing the hard right. We did a session at West Point a year ago. I took the board of directors to West Point, and we had, it was really just a working session. The whole concept was I wanted the board to develop a team dynamic around culture of courage. I mean, being on the board it's a difficult thing because what you have to do is the board of directors, we have management, and the board of directors' job is to oversee management. Now, you don't want to lean in and do their job, but you need to oversee management. So one of the things that our partners hold us accountable for is almost the things that you need to anticipate things that you don't know about. So it's really hard. Think about, okay, management's job is to run a firm. But so let's say if we had a cyber breach. The board looks bad because we didn't do something to think about the potential that we could have a cyber breach. So how many things can you think about there that could happen? It's endless. And so we spend a lot of time in a board meeting talking about, you know, whatever it is, whether it be around finances, whether it be about talent. I mean, I think the biggest issue for most firms out there is going to be re-energizing the new talent model. That we're going to go to, it's not just going to be about people getting jobs anymore and working on I'm going to pay you by week. Some people may want to be telecommuting. They may want to work part-time. They may want to work on, you know, a percentage only, not have a base comp. And so if we don't think about that stuff now, it's going to hurt us in 5 years. And so we have a lot of things like that the firm is looking at. Permanent contractors. Some people may not want to actually commit to, when you work at Deloitte, you have to do not just client work, but you have to do recruiting, and other things. Some people want to just, I want to just do client work. Okay, so maybe the relationship that you and I have is going to be, you'll be a Deloitte contractor. You can work here for 20 years, but all we do is we pay you to work on clients. That's not what I would choose, but that may be what somebody else would choose. Well, so looking at how to reimagine the talent engine is probably the most important thing, I think, right now, because you guys are going to have a lot of options when you come out of school, and you want to find a firm that hits all of the things that are important to you. But one piece of advice is, any firm you join has, clearly, if it's a big consulting firm, if it's a big corporate firm, they're in existence for many years, they're a good firm. It's really finding the firm that kind of hits you in the heart, not your head, your heart. There's days where, I say this line and I really believe it. I've been working at this firm, January will be 36 years, and there's probably been 20 days in 36 years I've not been happy, and they've never been 26. They've never been consecutive days. Every day, there's one day every while you want to go home and you want to just like scream. But for the majority of things, if you find a firm that you like, listen, you go through a lot of annoying conversations, and dealing with people is dealing with people. But unless you get if you measure a firm on all those other things, rather than just kind of it's more the intrinsic things than the stuff that is on the outside that actually makes it a difference. If you just, my son, I won't tell you what company he works for, but my son is your age, and he works for a firm, and he's not as worried about the intrinsic. And I'm trying to teach him now. He's doing very, very well there. He loves it. He's really happy. He's doing very successful. But in his mind, he's there. I asked him a question. I said, on an engagement scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you with this company? He said, 9.5. I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you think they treat you from a pay and from a feedback perspective? 9. On a scale of 1 to 10, what's the chance you're going to work there in 5 years? 2. And I said, what? And it was because in his mind, he's an entrepreneur, he's thinking about it, and I'm like, but what could they do to make that be 9? And it's funny. And he said, well, I'd have to change the way I think first, because I took the job thinking this is going to be an experience. I said, good, that's fine. I said, that's fine. And so experiences, the last thing I'll leave you before I open up to questions is, every one of you probably has a dossier of everything you want to do in your life by the time you're 30 and 40, and how much money you want to make, and what experience and what you want to do. I will tell you, it's really about the experiences that actually makes it important. Don't worry about, I want to become a manager in 2 years, I want to do this in 3 years. Take an experience and say, I want to get over the next 10 years, I want to get these 5 experiences. And if one of them is working in a country that's underdeveloped, if one of them is, I want to work on a client that looks like this, whatever it is, but judge it by experiences versus kind of a resume. Because the people that I find that are most unhappy are the ones that they start a conversation with, well, 2 years ago I thought I was going to be a manager at this point, I'm making this much money, and now I'm doing. The problem was 2 years ago you shouldn't have made that. That's a prediction. You can't ever predict what happens. And so the question is, did you get the right experience? And maybe it would take you 3 years to be manager, but you'll learn so much more and feel much more fulfilled than just working off a resume. And it's funny, I could look back at my point in my career now and say, I wish I could give myself the advice that I'm giving others, because I didn't have a roadmap. I was never looking to be the chairman. You would never find the conversation I had. I got elected to chairman about 20 months ago. I never once in my dreams thought that the partners would say, I want you to be my chairman. When I got a call and they said, you're on a list, one of the 3 that we're thinking of being the chairman, I said, me, really? Okay, what should I do? Okay, and then so they said, come in and talk about your vision about the firm and what you do in the next 4 years. I said, okay. But it wasn't like, I know trust me, there's hundreds of partners that had that speech ready. I wasn't one of them. There's hundreds, maybe more than hundreds of partners that would have wanted that and had that prepared. I wasn't one of them. I'm not saying to do what I did, but I looked for experiences. And when I look back at all the things I did in my career, some of them were very pointed. Some of them happened by happenstance. And it's that combination, I think, that really made it what I feel like a really full career for me. But everybody here, you have such a great future. One question, I don't know if anybody would ask this, but one question I get a lot when I do speaking is, with the advance of technology, are companies going to stop hiring people? Is the recruiting model going to change? Absolutely not. What I would say is, the example I started with, where I went to a meeting, two weeks after I started, it's going to be more like that, because what's going to happen is, the technology would do a lot of the stuff that young people, that entry-level people did for a couple of years. Technology was so advanced. So the question is going to be, you'll be giving insights into that data a lot earlier than you would have before technology advances. So we'll still hire as many people. It's just what you do will be better, and frankly, much more exciting. I mean, what I did when I first started was literally, very mundane work. The computers do the mundane work now. Now we ask our people to say, okay, here's the data. We have to go meet with Coca-Cola or Pepsi, or what a company is. They're looking for insight into this data. What do you see? So at 2 years out of school, when we ask you to perform as a part of a team to do insight around data, and that's what I find. That's what I find really, really exciting. The fact that you'll jump so far ahead of what I did. I probably didn't have that opportunity until 5 or 6 years working with the firm. You guys will do it in the first year. So, with that, I thank you for being here, and I'm going to just take. Do I have some time for a quick Q&A? Get some questions. Hear what's on your mind.
Thank you. So I don't know if any of our other speakers actually didn't hide behind the podium and smile and really work the crowd. So thank you.
Should I go behind the podium? I'm not.
But I just had a question regarding your positivity, or at least what it seems like exudes in this room. How do you approach every single thing with that positive mindset? So that you can have only 20 days and 36 years that you feel, maybe not everything is great. But it seems like you have this kind of resiliency, this kind of positive outlook that keeps you on this forward path. So I was wondering if you could talk more about that.
Good. I mean, thank you. Interesting. I early on, I looked at it and said, this is a true story. I mean, there's always going to be somebody who's smarter, taller, skinnier, whatever word it is. And so I said, you know what? I never looked at it as a competition. And so, because from day one, I never looked at it as a competition. It wasn't like I was trying to outskill my peer. And I think that gave me a sense of calm, in that it's not like I have to work harder or longer hours or anything like that. I had to do what I wanted to do. And from day one, I just said, listen, I always say this, instead of play the game, I'm going to change the game. I'm going to make it a game that I'm good at. And so I just early on said that was the way I'm going to look at things. And again, I never had the outlook that said I wanted to be the chairman of the board. Now, that doesn't mean that's the right thing to do. A lot of people, you could be goal-driven. In fact, hopefully every one of you are goal-driven, but it should be goals that are holistic goals. And so I just looked at it like a very simple, I'm on a journey. I actually don't know where the end. A lot of people feel like they know where the end is. I never had a pot of gold at the end that I was looking for. I was just on a journey, and as long as I moved forward, I was happy. Moving forward meaning doing stuff that made me good, feel good. I will tell you though, one thing I'm not good at is if there's somebody I work with that I feel has low integrity, I don't want to deal with them. And you come across, integrity to me means a lot. And so, I call it people that will sell their soul for anything. I don't have time for those people. I'll just say I won't deal with them, because they're in every firm. But the issue is, if you feel comfortable with yourself, I think that's the best advice. Again, it worked for me. I'm not saying it works for everybody, it worked for me. Anything else? I can't see any hands.
First of all, thanks for coming. Today we have a lot of unstructured data, and it's very difficult to perform an analysis without the use of great technology. So I would like to know your opinion about the relation of artificial intelligence and consulting services in today's reality. Is your company needs to adapt its services with this new reality? Thank you.
So, I just want to make sure. So, what do we think about artificial intelligence and virtual reality, the new technology? I mean, again, I actually think they're going to be incredible tools that companies like ours and other firms will be able to use. So I don't look at them as stuff that you worry about. I look at it as literally, if you have the ability to use artificial intelligence to help solve a client's problem, that makes it so much. It's going to make it so much more exciting for people to get their work done. And I think what it's going to do. It's going to flatten organizations. Like I said, it took me 11 years to be a partner at Deloitte because every year I did something different. I think things like artificial intelligence, what that's going to do, organizations are going to become flatter because there'll be less learnings and it will be more insight. And so I actually think for people your age, you should look at artificial intelligence as a real positive. Some people get worried about it and say, a robot's going to replace what I could do. Well, if robots could replace what you could do, you're not that good at it because they can't give insight. And so the question is, you could use a robot, you could be able to use a robot to help you, but they're not going to be able to actually do all the processing and stuff that clients pay us for. So I think of artificial intelligence as an enabler for people at the young age to kind of get much more senior quicker. So it almost is going to flatten out organizations. So I'm a big supporter. I wish I knew more about it. I mean, I go to these, I go to a lot of these technologies, but I'm, being an old guy, I still have to call my 7-year-old when the remote control gets screwed up at home on the TV. So, but I think artificial intelligence is something that's going to really help people get to the top of their career much quicker.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, okay, thank you so much for being here with us today. My question is about kind of the balance between two things that you mentioned. There's been a lot of emphasis on focusing in one area, being an expert at it, get the 10,000 hours of practice. And you mentioned going for experiences that could be diverse or not necessarily related to one person's field, and it could be personal or professional. So what's your opinion about balancing both, especially in today's world where people just change, we change majors in college, but we also change career paths so often, more often than ever before? Good
question, because the question about kind of, I call it, so the terms I use is vertical and horizontal. So I actually do think that you need to develop a skill in something. You can't just be a vertical person unless you want to go into sales. I mean, in even sales, you still need to know something to sell it. So you start with a vertical. So get technical knowledge in some area. Now, some people could choose their whole career to be the best technical expert there. We have anybody who's an accounting major here? We have accountants who are the best accountants in the world, and they knew out of the day of school they wanted to become an accountant, and they wanted to be the CFO of a company, and that was what the skill they was going to develop. Other people say, I want to develop a finance skill. So maybe that's a little bit different than just a bug here or something, than just having a skill around accounting. So they understand accounting, finance, corporate development, things like that. So I think it's a very personal thing. My view, I always said I had professional ADHD, so I couldn't do one thing forever. I don't think it would work for me. So I was somebody that every couple of years I had to try something else. But we have a lot of people who are very successful who do one thing really, really well, and they get energy from that. So I think it's very personal. Again, I think it depends on every individual. There's no right or wrong here, though. There's absolutely no right or wrong.
About the difference between internships and sponsorships. Sponsorships and mentorships. You mentioned that you had a lot of people who came to you for sponsorships and you heard their stories. I was just wondering, what was your favorite story or insight that you ever heard from a person whom you were sponsoring? Okay, well, I'm actually going to give you. That's my favorite, but it's kind of a little bit of a funny story. So, one of the women who actually was a sponsor of mine recently retired. And she and I are still close. She called me up. She said, we have a younger woman partner who I think can use your style of working with them. They are aggressive, and people tend to stay away from her
because she has a very, her personality is a tough personality. And they said, I think you could help her. So I said, okay, fine. So she reached out to me, and I said, okay, let's have a meeting. Let's get to know each other. And the only thing in the first meeting we're going to get done, we're going to get to know each other. I don't want to. So I told a little bit about myself, and then I said to her, she told me about herself, and I said to her, what's your biggest development need? And she said to me, I'm usually the smartest person in every room I'm in, and people know that, and they get annoyed with me. So I looked at her and I said, you know what? That's the most annoying thing I ever heard in my life. I swear, I said to her, and I thought she was going to run out crying. And I said to her, I got to tell you, that annoyed me when you said that. I said, so that's what has to annoy other people. And then I thought she would never call me again. To this day now, this is about 2-3 years, she calls me like once a month for feedback because she said, no one has ever been honest with me. And that comment, I thought she'd run for the hills, but that comment that was the first time somebody was that honest with something, because she was right that she may have been the smartest, but I was right. She annoyed everybody. And she's actually changed, and I've actually watched her change in group dynamics. I gave her opportunities in situations where she had to work in a better team environment, and now the feedback on her is way different. But I just took a risk and said that. She could have said to me, how dare you say it to me? So I wouldn't say it's the best example, but I think that's kind of a funny example, because I'm a pretty not subtle person. I'll tell people the way it is, and I do think it's important that people are honest with people and stuff like that. But she would say I'm her sponsor now because of that. Not just that interaction, but everything afterwards. And by the way, I got nothing out of this. In other words, she works in a part of the practice, and that it's not like by her being better, it made me better. Part of sponsorship is doing something altruistic. Not everything, but in this case, my sponsor asked me to pay it forward and do her a favor, so I did it. I didn't get anything out of helping this one person, but so in some cases, sponsorship is, you do it a little bit more altruistic. You see talent in somebody, and it's there. I would say it's like a ball of clay, but you got to help mold it to see it to be a piece of art, and that's how I'm good with people who I see that really talented ball of clay. But you got to help them become the piece of art. I know, time-wise, are we okay, time-wise? Take another question? No? One more question? Oh.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for coming. What I would like to ask is more about, do you ever take a personal time to be reflective on yourself? I mean, everything is in this today world, everything's very fast, and probably in a blink it's already 10 years or 20 years. How do you take the time for yourself to be reflective? I want to know. But
it's funny. No, it's funny. It's a good question, and this is something to your question earlier. When I grew up in a firm, it was I remember somebody telling me this. It's a really crazy piece of advice. Never leave the office earlier than your boss. First of all, that's the stupidest thing in the world, right? But that was somebody told me that. And so, you know what, I remember I got married and had children young. I had my daughter when I was 26. And I remember, there were times where I wanted to get home before she went to bed. And so I wasn't even a partner yet. And I was probably a manager, and I would leave the office at 5 o'clock, and I would take work with me. And so I would say, my job and my life are intermingled. I'm not a person that I work this much, and then I take 24/7. I fit my life into 24/7. So to this day, I'll be proud of this, even as the chairman. I don't think I've ever missed a parent-teacher conference. It's funny. I'm okay missing the spring concert, where your kid goes last after 4 hours of listening to terrible, music. But I haven't missed a parent-teacher conference in 30. My daughter's 30. So I made that. That's more important than any meeting. I said to my wife, when is the meeting? I put it in my calendar. I'm not going to miss that, regardless. If it's a client meeting, I don't care. I'm not going to miss that hour. That's important to me. So I prioritize what's important to me, and then I make it as part of my. It's part of my assistant knows when things are important and put it in my calendar, and I just prioritize it. I'm not a person that could take my mind doesn't stop. So I can't work hard and then take 3 weeks off and do nothing. So I'm taking 2 weeks off over the Christmas holidays. But I'll still check email. But I'm not gonna unplug. I'd say I re-energize it as opposed to unplug. I'll still be available, but at my time. Now other people find it much better to just say, I need to totally unplug for 2 weeks. That's 3 weeks, that's time for them. I have a house down the Jersey Shore, so in the summers I try to, doesn't happen, but I try to get down there on Thursday nights and work at home on Fridays and take calls. So I could at least, be in my shorts and be on the beach on, Friday at 5 o'clock. It doesn't always happen because I'm traveling globally, but I try it. And my admin early on, in March, she'll start making my calendar for the summer. And she'll, okay, we're not going to make any live meetings in New York on Fridays if we don't have to. So again, it's whatever is personal to them. But I fit it in kind of within my whole 24/7 calendar. Okay, I think I'm on time, so thank you all very much. I really appreciate you.